Hey, this is Josh Burkey, and you're listening to Chasing Dreams with Amy J.
Welcome to Chasing Dreams podcast with Amy J. Amy believes that realizing a life without regrets is achieved by taking chances, chasing your dreams, making moves, and overcoming your doubts. The Chasing Dreams podcast will help you overcome life's obstacles, believe in your potential, and inspire you to face your fears. And now here's the woman who is passionately pursuing her dreams, Amy J.
Hey Dream Chasers, this is Amy J, and thank you so much for tuning in to episode 143 of Chasing Dreams. Today's episode is sponsored by our Patreon campaign supporters. Thanks to all of you guys for being rock stars. I am grateful and humbled by your support. For more information on our Patreon campaign and or if you'd like to donate $1 a month to help keep the show going, you can learn more at amyj21.com/Patreon. In honor and recognition of Mental Health Awareness Month, because it is still May, I have someone you guys are going to want to meet. So continue the celebration. Please meet Josh Burkey, aka Captain Nostalgia. He is the host behind the podcast Victims and Villains. As a survivor of depression and addiction, Josh aims to break stigma of mental health issues through conversation and relationships of pop culture. He lives in Pennsylvania with his wife and 2 cats, and his tag phrase or catchphrase, if you will, that really caught my eye and was the reason why I wanted him on the show is talk nerd, talk hope, speak nothing else. And so definitely keep listening, guys. It's a fun conversation. And so without further ado, here it is. Hey, Josh, thank you so much for joining the show at this late night. Appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime. I'm always flexible.
It's funny because you're a podcaster. I'm a podcaster. We were both in Philly. We never crossed paths, but it's still a small world because you know my friends, Jeff and Kristen, who were on the show previously, episode 34, and they had nothing but good things to say about you. So I'm really glad we were able to get you for Mental Health Awareness Month. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem. I love those dudes. The silly talks and Prison Dad, great stuff.
Now, it's not often that I hear about, I mean, I've heard of podcasts that talk about nerd stuff, for lack of a better term, you know, comic books and whatnot, but you actually also talk about mental health in that. Was that an intentional mesh of topics for you?
So originally when we had created the podcast, I was kind of going through a season of depression because I had this salary job in my work. I had one bad day, as the Joker puts it, and I got demoted and went through this kind of like pride and like depression, for lack of a better word. And I started getting into podcasts, and I convinced my best friend to start this podcast with me. And originally we just got together, talked about film and comic books and the TV. And about 6 months into it, or probably about 3 or 4 months into it, sorry, I felt this conviction from God that I had been given this platform to talk about stuff, but I wasn't, doing it to make a difference. And this was July, and September was National Suicide Awareness Prevention Month. And we kind of came together to do this suicide special to talk about to take our normal format, but to break them up with topics of having people come on and share their story of overcoming depression and suicide and anxiety and self-harm and addiction. And it was meant to be this one-off thing, and it just stuck. We got such positive feedback from it that it stuck, and it really set us apart from a lot of the other, like you're talking about, you've heard of podcasts that deal with, nerd news or nerd topics or pop culture, but you've never heard of this marriage between the two. And that was really what we felt like set us apart. But we were also engaging and having conversations and bringing forth conversations that we really felt like were lacking. And I'm not sure if you are in the comic book culture or the Comic-Con world, but
it's a wonderful place to be.
It is. But I found when I was starting to kind of get to know these creators or these fans that they came to these fandoms as an escape from real world, as an escape from, suicide or depression. It's like, well, okay, if all these things run rampant and bring you to these fandoms in the first place, why is no one telling you that there's hope? Why is no one telling you that there's a reason to hold on? And so that was kind of the mission statement that we had going forward. And it was another podcast that we are friends with, the Retro Rewind guys, that challenged us to kind of take hold of, our identity as a podcast. And, that's where Talk Nerd, Talk Hope, and Speak Nothing Else comes from.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that it's an escape. I never put the two together. But one of the things I found, I've been to New York Comic Con, I've been to San Diego Comic Con, and the one thing I have always found amongst both of those is if everyone attended a Comic Con, whether it's San Diego, New York, or maybe one of the other ones even, the world would be a better place because there is just nothing but support and kindness and happiness and just positivity there. Is it the same at the Philadelphia Comic Con?
We just covered the Philadelphia Comic Con not that long ago, but the majority of the cons that we've covered PopComicanza and Dunkirk and the Four State Comic Con here in Hagerstown, Maryland, and we've just done all these like little smaller cons, and we did New York Comic Con last year. But yeah, what you find is that there's this desire, and especially when we go to a convention and we do press, when especially among cosplayers, we'll tell them a little bit about what the show is and that we want to interview them. And their immediate reaction 9 times out of 10 is, this is so needed, because I'll meet people that will tell me about how this character, why they feel a connection to this character. And it's, it's an inspiration or it's a drawing point of escape for them. So I do find that there is a lot of positivity and there's a lot of acceptance in the comic book culture.
Yes.
There is also that negativity sometimes, and we might not see it as much. And I think it's kind of one of those things that it's background noise. But I sat into a panel at a con last year, and it was talking about cosplay and how people really put themselves out there as cosplayers, and you need to have a nice, and there's a movement among some of the cosplayers. Cosplay doesn't have a body shape, and I love that, because it's it means that if you're not quite skinny enough to be comic book Wonder Woman, still embrace that. Wonder Woman is a symbol of power, not of cleavage and legs.
Oh, absolutely. And there's an acceptance from people who understand that world. I do agree that there is some negativity out there, but it is background noise, or it's from people who don't understand the cosplay world or that acceptance. At least that's what I find.
No, you're totally right. And when we kind of started doing this, because my wife and I, we will sometimes during these conventions, we use this as a platform for ministry. So when we kind of tell people about what we do as far as ministry, you have to explain it. There's a lot of confusion because people don't understand that there's these Comic-Con conventions. They don't understand cosplay, and so you do kind of have to understand it, the negativity of it as well. And I think that it's one of those things that you have to take with a grain of salt and embrace the culture for what it is, because Comic-Con as a culture is one of the most unique people groups in the world. You can have people break bread
yes.
that would be from 2 completely different, walks of life, but this one fandom brings them together.
Right. They have that commonality that that unites them, so to speak. And it's across cultures, it's across ages, genders, sexual orientation. At least that's what I've felt. And I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, if you could just go to a Comic-Con, you can just restore your faith in humanity, at least for a day. Don't turn on the news. But, when you see a mini Goku from Dragon Ball Z playing around with an elderly Vegeta, it's awesome to see just how people interact. I really do believe everyone should attend one at some point because it's just an environment of acceptance for the most part. It is.
And I love that. I love that this is a culture that's completely accepting, because I have friends that, you know, by cultural definitions, we should not be friends because of the backgrounds that we have or the things that we believe. But we're united because we like Superman, or we're united because we love Star Wars, or, you know, there's all these commonalities. Like, that's ironically, like, my best friends that I have today, the people that I talk to on a daily basis, like, they are my best friends because of this world, because of these fandoms. And I love being able to turn people onto fandoms as well, and like giving them suggestions and saying, well, it's not really as bad as you think it is, or, you know, give it a second shot.
Well, you know, to that point, that there is some fandoms that have a bad seed about them, but, you know, stay away from that. Not everything is bad. But I wanted to ask you, when you said that you were talking to cosplayers and they said it's much needed, did you find that was across ages? Was there anything like everyone was saying, hey, mental health, we need to talk about this?
Honestly, most of the cosplayers that we've had on our show or during these conventions have been probably anywhere between like early 20s to maybe early 30s. So, but I think that we have this common misconception about suicide, and we think that it only affects youth, or we think that it can only get to people of, you know, a certain age, and that's not the case at all. Suicides is a factor. It's the second leading cause of death from 10 to ages 24. The most common people in the most common age group that it affects are middle-aged men. So I think that we kind of have this misconception and this stigma, and there's conversations that need to be had. And when we would interview these cosplayers, they would just kind of be taken back. We interviewed a cosplayer back in March, and she just was so blown away that this was a thing, that, you know, taking these worlds but using it as a platform to say, hey, look, there's hope. And she was a survivor of almost losing her husband to suicide. And you look and you hear stories like that, and you say, but no one's hearing this. No one's hearing the person because they're just too busy seeing the cosplayer or the outfit. And to me, I want to put on platform the stories behind those persons. And I totally agree that, you know, they're justified in saying that it's not something that is not being talked about as much as it should be.
Do you have an idea of, or a thought as to why mental health, talking about it, is such a stigma? Like, why don't we talk about it?
One of the things that I agree with a lot, and we saw this a lot when we did the Great Philadelphia Comic Con, was stigma exists because it's so easy for someone to be able to see a actual sickness. So if I had a cough or a cold or allergies, that's something that you can physically see ailments for. It's something that you can physically see with your eyes and your hands and hold something like, you know, mucus, or see a cough with your own eyes. But mental health is something that we can't see. It's something like, you know, bipolar or schizophrenia or multiple personality disorder, all these things that we can't see because it's all mental, it's all in our head. And the stigma, I think, that exists for one of two reasons. I think a stigma exists because it's something that we can't see. And so if we can't physically see something, we as a society, both as a Christian and a suicide prevention advocates, I think that we have trouble believing in something that we can't physically see or can't physically grasp or can't physically wrap our minds around. And so I think that exists on that playing field, for one. And for two, I think that it also exists because, you know, this is the generation of Instagram and Snapchat, and we want our best out there. We don't want anyone to know that we're less than the person that we're portraying on our social media. And so we have this stigma as well. I think that, it exists because we want to personify this image of who we are. And that's not always 100% right all the time.
No, I agree. I'm glad you said that about the first point, both points. But the first point, it's interesting you say that. If we can't visualize it, we have a hard time believing it. And my dad isn't in the greatest health, and he has a handicap sticker. And so he has to park in a handicap spot, but he can walk, he can talk, he can move around. But because it's heart issue, he can only walk certain distances. And so if you didn't know that, he doesn't have a broken leg, he doesn't have a broken arm, nothing like that, nothing visually. I have heard stories of people who have parked in handicap spots and have returned to a note on their car saying, that these spots are for people who are actually handicapped. And it's because they didn't see that person with a bandage, a crutch, or, a wheelchair or something. We're so quick to make judgments that if we can't have that visual representation of the illness, we can't have that scarlet letter, so to speak, you don't have it. And yeah, I think it goes to all places, but mental health especially.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we don't do that. And so one of our yes, like you talked about, like we are our podcast, but we're so much more than that because of how big suicide is. And just in the 2 years that we've existed as a podcast, we have seen suicide increase by 2,000 people a year.
That's crazy.
And yeah, exactly. And it just blows my mind, and it makes me cry and weep and broken. And so that's why we've extended into doing press for conventions and speaking engagements and panels and, guest spots on podcasts like this, because we want to get the conversation going and we want to see this stigma broken. And our ultimate end goal is to be able to get education and curriculum taught in schools, because if kids are going through puberty, which is, right around the time that emotions kind of start, going a little bit haywire in the body, things that you didn't used to feel, you feel to a more extreme now. And we need to teach kids about things like depression and saying that it's okay to not be okay as long as you're opening up and getting the conversations out there that need to be had.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's almost like everyone's affected, but if you can get the kids, the youth, to work on themselves, be more confident, embrace issues of mental health, and that it's okay to feel what you're feeling, and that you're justified in doing that, then hopefully, because I think you're right, it's not one that we can kind of fix right away, but you're making steps to have these conversations. And you're working closely to kind of spread it amongst, like with these conversations, as you said, and with Comic-Cons and stuff. Do you partner with things outside of the Comic-Con world in maybe the comic book world or pop culture or anything?
We do, actually. We partner. Over the years, we've partnered with specific comic book publications. We're actually right now working on our first mini series as a comic book that will dive into the spiritual suicide of suicide and depression, and the kind of it's kind of like to describe it, I guess best, it would be like Inside Out meets Crisis on Infinite Earth. So it's just a little bit darker and more real. And so we've worked with them. We've worked with it's been done for like a year, but we haven't had it done and printed out yet. But we put out a 2-page informational thing. We teamed up with an artist from Italy to produce it. I just got off a phone call tonight about having advertisements for what we do in a comic book. So we've been able to partner with them on a business side. We've also been able to partner with them and do reviews as well, because one of the things that, when we were talking about expanding and really thinking, how do we grow what we're doing here on the podcast and bring this to new platforms? Comic books, we started reviewing comic books, and we've partnered with a network now to where we're starting to do movie reviews. So all of these independent creators are bringing their audience in to hear our message of hope and the statistics for them as well.
Do you also, as you're doing this, because that's amazing that you're kind of expanding and branching out the way you are, you guys talk about how mental health is perceived in these mediums?
We have in our podcast format, we've done special episodes that have been dedicated exclusively to themes of mental health. We put out one last year on breaking stigma. We put out another one last year that was about eating disorders and bringing awareness to them, and the mindset of that as well. This year we put out another one. I mean, we've put out several different, themed episodes. We're working on one right now that's going to be looking at the Church in Euthanasia, which was a cult out of the 90s that promoted, suicide as a way to help the earth. And so,
Wait, you're serious?
Yeah. Oh man, they it's one of the weirdest things. They just Google it. I'll send you a link when we get done recording. It's one of the most bizarre human things that's ever happened in all of the last 25 years.
I'm blown. Yeah, please do. I'm blown by that.
But yeah, we so essentially we just recorded an episode last night on a Batman manga or anime, sorry. And we looked at mental health. We pick out mental health themes in the things that we cover. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Because I'm curious because, oftentimes people get their education from these mediums. And I'm curious, now, are they portraying it accurately or fairly necessarily, and some take it seriously, some take it to heart, and some probably phone it in. I don't know. And so that's why I was always curious is when you do those reviews, are you finding that it's pretty fair?
Yes and no. I mean, not every single thing that we review is mental health based. We have obviously being pop culture, we do embrace that. But we also look to bring awareness. So last year, for example, was 20 years since Chris Farley passed away. So we would do these special episodes where we would go through and pick out one of his movies to talk about with a guest. And we would use it as a way to raise awareness for people that were struggling with addiction. Mm-hmm. And, kind of bringing that in there. But I think a lot of the times that we are seeing, I think that there's a shift in our culture. So we're starting to see these mental illnesses or these, taboo topics kind of slowly make their way into our culture. Last year, Power Rangers was a great example because it broke the stereotypes of the original one and embraced things like, autism and LGBT themes, while also, really embracing this campy property. It showed that it could really bring depth to these issues.
Well, that's a good point. And that's a good example. I think a lot more shows and televisions, movies are kind of taking a step towards that to kind of be more inclusive. I mean, there's ways to go, I'm sure, but at least it's being brought. It's no longer being hidden, at least actively, from other things. So, Josh, let me ask, this podcast, the movement that you're doing, the work you're doing, is this something you'd like to do full time?
Absolutely. And like I said, our ultimate goal is to do this full time as a 501c3, because we really want to, I really like that what the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does. I feel like the way that we approach things is a little bit different than the way that they do. And sure. We just went to a brunch for them this past Saturday, and the way that they do stuff and the way that they use their money, they're really trying to understand how the brain processes things like, depression and suicide and mental illness. And I love that. And I stand behind that. And they're a great organization. But our ultimate goal is to be able to have these conversations and do it full time, to where we are seeing these curriculums be brought into schools. And American Foundation for Suicide Prevention is making steps towards making that happen. And that's great. But we really, and we support them, and we want to follow in that. Shadow, I guess, is the best terminology, but yes, we eventually want to be able to do this full time and to travel full time and, expand and do other, markets, not just, podcasts and YouTubes. Like we said, we're slowly working on comic books now, and we would like to eventually get to be able to do film at some point. So
no, that would be awesome. I mean, to your point and to your credit, I think what you were doing and what you're trying to do, hopefully in the future, is unique and is a different way to approach people. That, what the American Foundation is doing is awesome and is needed just as much. But I think there's room for both of you guys, and I think there has to be, because I think you will reach people that they will not, and vice versa. And I just think that partnering with each other, or just, working together to do it, but staying in your own lane in the sense of not compromising how you're doing it. Because I think what you're doing is so needed, because it makes it friendly. It makes it approachable. I want to talk about it because this is something I'm comfortable with. But once you start talking about research and numbers and facts, and, then I might shy away. But whereas someone else might need that versus, I'm not really comfortable talking about the way Josh is talking about it. So I really do hope that at some point that you both can kind of maybe work together or partner. The fact that you guys are at brunches together is awesome. I can't wait to see you do this full time, because I think it's so needed. Thank you.
And I mean, like we're trying right now. Like our biggest thing for 2018 was really to, last year was we felt we really wanted to be able to plant seeds, for lack of a better term. So like we did the Philadelphia Podcast Festival and like got inducted, for lack of a better word. I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. Like my wife and I, we got cool little business cards. It was like Philadelphia Podcasting Society. And I was like, this is so cool. It stays in my wallet now all the time. But like having that, and then we have like a group of churches that we're connected with in Virginia. And so like every time like we go down there, like we're able to plug in and educate people. But also when we do events down there, we have somewhere that if people want to have religion as an alternative to break through their seasons of depression, they have that available. And we've been able to, like, that was our goal for last year, but this year has really been on connecting locally. So like the Out of the Darkness walks, if someone's listening to this and you want to be like, I want to get involved, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention does these walks called the Out of the Darkness walks, and you walk in awareness to have people to, raise awareness and get conversations going on suicide. And we're stoked to be able to, just even set up a table and do a live podcast there this year. Whereas last year we just went to check it out, and it's just about making those little steps and those little connections and saying, hey, this is what we do. We'd like to partner with what you guys do, and moving, growing from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. You're definitely growing if you went from checking it out to now doing a podcast live there. And guys, we're going to try and have the links to these things on the show notes page so that you can get more information about it. Josh, I have a question for you about, what you're doing and stuff, but for someone who's listening and isn't sure what to do and is resonating with the conversation you're having, how can they get help?
There's multiple ways to get help. And the easiest way is to pick up a phone, call the Suicide Lifeline. And I didn't actually know this, so I learned this, but the way that the Suicide Lifeline works is when someone calls the satellites, for lack of a better word, they program and see your area code. So they actually match you with people that are in your county and in your community.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I thought that was so cool.
That is.
And so that number is 1-800-273-8255. And now you also have it to where you can text anonymously to 741-741 and just have conversations with people. we live in a texting age, and it's only a matter of time before people were able to, want to have these conversations via text. And I think it makes it a lot more comfortable. It appeals a lot more to the younger demographic that might not want to call the lifeline because, a parent or a friend or a boyfriend or a girlfriend might hear them and think less of them. So it's a great tool as well. And there's also I don't remember the website's name, but I'll get it to you, I promise. But there is a way that you can log right onto a computer or right from your mobile phone, and you can actually have a conversation similar to that of like Facebook Messenger or AIM, just stuff like that. And of course, we make ourselves available. So if someone should be listening to this and connects with, like you're talking about, resonates with something that our show stands for, every content that we push, whether it's appearing on another show, appearing on our own show, or doing YouTube, we always tell people that they can message us any hours of the night. And as soon as we're available to, we'll hit you right back up.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And guys, we'll get the links again. You can always rewind to get the phone number, but it'll be on the show notes page too. So Josh, as we wrap up, let me ask you, for someone who is chasing their dream, trying to figure out what they're doing, what is one thing you would recommend that they do? Understand that at the end of the day, that there are good days and there are bad days, and never letting a bad day lose sight of your good day, because at the end of that bad day, you still have the same breath in your lungs that you had on that good day. You still have a roof over your head that you had on your good day. You still had gas in your car to get from point A to point B to point C to point D, so on and so forth. And knowing above all that whether it's a good day, bad day, rainy, sunny, you have worth and you have value. Never give up. Never, ever compromise. Stay true to who you are. There is hope, guys. Josh, thank you so much for coming on the show and just talking about hope, because I think that's an awesome message that you're spreading. Thank you. And yeah, anytime. Like we said, there's always hope. Hope is worth reaching for with every ounce of strength that you have. And guys, that was Josh Burkey. So glad he was able to come on the show. He's doing amazing work. And you guys can learn more about Josh, his podcast, and the work he's doing over on the show notes page at amyj21.com/episode 143. That's episode 143. So remember, guys, in the words of Josh, talk nerd, talk hope, speak nothing else. Till next time, keep chasing.
Thank you so much for listening to Chasing Dreams. Amy would love to connect with you and hear all about your pursuit of chasing your dreams. Connect with her on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram via @ChasingDreamsHQ. Or you can find Amy on Twitter @AmyJ21. That's AIMEEJ21. Be sure to visit headquarters over at ChasingDreamsHQ.com for more inspiration, motivation, and resources to help with your own dream chase. We hope you'll join Amy next week, and until then, keep chasing.